For most of human history, memory was treated like a filing cabinet. You lived something, a clerk somewhere inside your skull stamped it with a date, and it went into a drawer exactly the way it happened. Pull the file back out 10 years later, and it should read the same. That assumption is built into how courts decide guilt, how families settle decades-old arguments, how you trust your own version of your own childhood. In 1932, a Cambridge psychologist named Frederick Bartlett tested that assumption almost by accident. He read British university students a short Native American folk tale called War of the Ghosts, a story with a structure unfamiliar to a 1930s English mind, then asked them to retell it, not once, repeatedly over weeks and months. The students didn't just forget pieces, they replaced them. Canoes became boats. Unfamiliar spiritual details got swapped for things closer to home, and every single person stayed certain their retelling was accurate. Not playback, not a recording at all. For a long time, the working assumption was simple. Memory is footage you replay. The actual mechanism looks closer to a courtroom sketch artist redrawing a face from a description, then redrawing that redrawing the next time someone asks. Each pass changes the picture a little, and the artist never notices the drift. That matters because you're currently carrying thousands of memories you'd swear under oath are accurate. Your first kiss, the fight that ended a friendship, the exact words your father said the day he left. Some fraction of those details didn't happen the way you remember, not because you're lying, and not because your memory is unusually bad. Most people assume they'd be the exception, that their own memory is somehow sturdier than the average case in a study. There's no good evidence that's true for anyone. It's because of what memory is actually built to do, which isn't what most people assume it's built to do. By the end of this, the courtroom sketch artist is going to make a lot more sense than the filing cabinet ever did. In 1984, a 22-year-old college student named Jennifer Thompson was raped in her apartment in Burlington, North Carolina. She survived the attack by deliberately memorizing her attacker's face, studying his jaw, his hairline, a scar, convinced that paying close enough attention would protect the truth. She picked Ronald Cotton out of a photo lineup, then a physical lineup, then testified against him in court with total confidence. He was convicted and sentenced to life in prison. 11 years later, DNA evidence proved Cotton hadn't done it. Thompson's memory, vivid, detailed, completely sincere, had attached itself to the wrong man the entire time. This isn't a story about a careless witness. Thompson was about as careful as a person can be. The Innocence Project has since tracked hundreds of wrongful convictions overturned by DNA evidence, and eyewitness misidentification shows up in the majority of them, which means the courtroom isn't simply an unlucky place for memory to fail. It's closer to a stress test built around the exact conditions: fear, time pressure, a single look at a stranger's face under bad lighting, where memory is least reliable and most confident at the same time. That should bother you more than Bartlett's folktale. College students misremembering a story costs nothing. A misremembered face cost Ronald Cotton 11 years, and it cost the actual attacker 11 more years of freedom to keep offending. The stakes attached to a flawed memory system aren't abstract. They're measured in years inside a cell, in a justice system that, for most of its history, treated confident memory as something close to physical evidence, without ever checking whether confidence and accuracy were the same thing. They aren't, and the gap between them is bigger than all.
Psychologists call certain memories flashbulb memories, the ones that feel burned in with photographic precision, usually attached to something big. Where you were when you heard the news, what you were wearing, who told you first. In 2003, researchers Jennifer Tellerico and David Rubin asked over 50 people to record their memory of hearing about the September 11th attacks, then checked back in at 1 week, 6 weeks, and 32 weeks later. The vividness of those memories barely dropped over that stretch. People stayed just as certain at week 32 as they'd been at week 1. The accuracy dropped fast. Within weeks, details about where people were standing, who they were with, and what they did right afterward had already started shifting, while confidence stayed almost flat the entire time. Not a faded photograph, not a corrupted file. A confident, detailed, emotionally loaded memory that was already partly wrong within the first month, with no internal signal warning the person carrying it. So what does that mean for the question people default to when sorting out a disagreement? How sure are you? It's asking the wrong thing entirely. Confidence and accuracy are generated by different parts of the memory system, and they don't move together. That single, narrow fact is responsible for a disproportionate share of wrongful convictions, ruined friendships, and family arguments that never get resolved, because both people remembering it differently are being completely sincere. Sincerity was never the problem anyone needed to solve here. By the 7-week mark in Tallarico and Rubin's data, the average participant's account of September 11th had already drifted on multiple concrete details, yet self-reported confidence stayed close to its starting point the entire time. The gap between those two lines, confidence and accuracy, kept widening for months. Nobody inside that gap could feel it opening. The actual problem is what's happening.
In 2000, a neuroscientist named Kareem Nader ran an experiment on rats that overturned an assumption neuroscience had held for almost a century. The standard model said a memory, once formed and stored, stays locked, stable, like a saved file you can't edit afterward. Nader trained rats to fear a sound, then reactivated that memory and injected a protein-blocking drug into the brain region storing it. The same drug, given before the memory was reactivated, did nothing. Given right after recall, it erased the fear completely. The conclusion: a memory isn't simply retrieved once it's been recorded. Recalling it physically reopens the file, and the brain gets a short window to rewrite it before sealing it back up. Neuroscientists now call this reconsolidation. That sounds like a design flaw. It isn't. To a brain shaped by evolution to keep an animal alive, a memory that updates with new information beats a memory that stays perfectly literal. A wolf that remembers the exact taste, smell, and lighting of one poisoned carcass, and nothing more, survives a single close call. A wolf that generalizes that danger to anything resembling rotting meat in similar conditions survives a lot more of them. Perfectly literal, unchangeable memory would mean storing every detail of every day at full resolution forever, with no way to update any of it when the world changed around you. That's an enormous, brittle, and not especially useful design to stay alive. Most species that depend on memory at all seem to run on some version of the same trade-off, which is part of why reconsolidation shows up in rats, in birds, and in humans, rather than looking like a uniquely human flaw. Editable, reconstructive memory. In 1974, psychologists Elizabeth Loftus and John Palmer showed people footage of car accidents, then asked a single question with one word changed between groups. How fast were the cars going when they smashed into each other versus when they contacted each other? The word smashed produced higher speed estimates across the board. A week later, the smashed group was also more likely to report seeing broken glass in the footage. There was no broken glass in any of the footage. One word planted a week earlier manufactured a visual memory of something that never existed. Loftus pushed the idea further. In a study from the mid-1990s, now commonly called the Lost in the Mall experiment, she worked with participants' own families to plant one entirely false childhood memory, getting lost in a shopping mall around age 5, alongside several true memories the family had confirmed actually happened. Participants received short written summaries and were asked to recall as much detail as they could across several follow-up sessions. Roughly a quarter of participants developed a detailed false memory of an event that had never occurred. Some added sensory specifics entirely on their own: the carpet pattern, a man in a flannel shirt who helped them, the relief of spotting their mother's face in the crowd. None of it real. All of it felt exactly as real to them as the true memory sitting right next to it. When researchers later told participants which memory was fabricated, several pushed back, certain the mall memory was the genuine one and one of the true memories was the mistake. A different line of evidence comes from cognitive psychologists Henry Roediger and Kathleen McDermott, who in 1995 ran what's now known as the DRM paradigm. Participants heard lists of related words: bed, rest, tired, dream, wake, but never the word sleep itself. Asked afterward to recall the list, a large majority confidently included sleep as a word they'd heard. Their brain had filled in the obvious missing piece and misfiled the guess as a memory. In 2015, psychologist Julia Shaw took the same general technique into more serious territory. Using suggestive interviewing combined with fabricated supporting details, she and her team convinced roughly 70% of study participants that they had committed a crime as a teenager, assault, theft, that police had supposedly investigated at the time. None of these events had happened. Participants didn't just agree it was plausible. Many produced full sensory narratives: what the room looked like, how they felt, what they said. 4 separate research teams, 4 different decades, 4 different methods: a 1932 folktale, a 1974 traffic film, a mid-1990s shopping mall, a 2015 false confession, and the same underlying mechanism shows up every time.
Brain imaging studies built specifically to tell true memories apart from false ones run into a strange problem. There usually isn't much to find by looking at brain activity alone, at least not at a glance. When researchers put people in fMRI scanners and have them recall both real memories and DRM-style false ones, the same core network lights up almost every time: the hippocampus, the regions tied to imagery and emotional weight. Neuroscientist Craig Stark and others working in this area have found subtler differences in scans with very fine resolution and large sample sizes, mostly in how strongly certain sensory regions activate, but nothing close to a clean signal a person could feel from the inside. Which means there's no internal alarm, no flicker, no static, no warning light. A memory you completely invented under suggestion ends up feeling exactly as textured, exactly as emotionally charged, and exactly as confidently yours as a memory of something that genuinely happened to you. Think about that for a second. Every method you currently rely on to check whether a memory is real, how clearly you can picture it, how strongly you feel about it, how certain you sound when you tell it, is useless for this specific question. Vividness measures vividness. It does not measure truth. This is also why confronting someone with, "but I remember it so clearly," rarely settles a disagreement between two people who each believe themselves. Clarity was never evidence. It only feels like evidence because nothing else announces the difference.
For thousands of years, a community's record of what happened depended entirely on whoever was willing to retell it out loud, often years after the fact, with no outside check on accuracy whatsoever. Today, most people carry a phone capable of time-stamping, photographing, and recording almost anything as it happens in real time. The difference is enormous. A 1974 eyewitness in a courtroom had nothing to argue with except their own retelling and a lawyer's questions. A witness today can be handed a body camera clip, a text message timestamp, a security camera angle from across the street. The similarity matters more. The unaided human memory underneath all of that footage hasn't changed at all. It still reconsolidates every time it's recalled. It still can't tell a planted detail apart from a lived one. Police departments across the US and UK have started responding to exactly this.
Many now use double-blind sequential lineups instead of the traditional side-by-side kind, specifically because Loftus-style research showed the old format pushes witnesses toward confident false identifications. Showing every face at once invites comparison shopping, picking whoever looks most like the memory, rather than checking each face against it independently. Sequential, one-at-a-time viewing closes that loophole, and early field trials of the method report fewer confident misidentifications of the kind that convicted Ronald Cotton. The technology surrounding memory got radically better. The thing producing the memory in the first place did not move an inch. That gap is still where most of the damage happens, not back in 1974, but in courtrooms, family disputes, and personal histories running right now, in rooms with no camera pointed at any of it.
Go back to that filing cabinet. The image was always wrong, but it's a comfortable kind of wrong. It tells you that whatever you remember happened exactly that way. Full stop, no further questions necessary. What you actually carry around is closer to the sketch artist Bartlett's experiment pointed toward back in 1932. Someone redrawing a face from a description, then redrawing the redrawing. Every single time the memory gets pulled back out into the light. Ronald Cotton spent 11 years paying for a sketch that Jennifer Thompson believed completely and got wrong. One swapped word gave a 1974 witness a memory of broken glass that was never there to begin with. None of this makes memory worthless. A reconstructive system that updates, generalizes, and adapts is the reason you can learn from yesterday instead of replaying it uselessly on a loop forever. The wolf that updates its sense of danger outlives the wolf that insists on a perfect recording. Trading literal accuracy for flexibility was a fair deal for survival. It was never advertised as a fair deal for a courtroom, a family argument, or your own sense of who you are. The cost of that design is quiet and easy to miss. Certainty was never proof, and clarity was never evidence. Both can be manufactured by a single misleading word, a suggestive question, or simply enough time and enough retelling. So the next time a memory arrives feeling complete, vivid, and beyond question, that feeling is real. It just isn't telling you what you think it's telling you.